I want you to imagine something. A few months from now, you wake up one morning, open your phone, and suddenly realize something surprising. You are listening to English, not translating, not struggling, not pausing every few seconds. You simply understand. And the strange part is that you cannot remember exactly when it became easy. It just happened. Today's listening practice is designed to help you move one step closer to that moment. So relax, listen carefully, and let the English flow naturally into your mind. If you're ready to improve your English every day, make sure to subscribe and stay with me until the end, because one small story today may change the way you think about learning forever. Now let's begin. There was once a young man named Daniel. Daniel wanted to speak English fluently more than anything. Every morning he watched videos. Every evening he studied grammar. He bought books. He downloaded apps. He filled notebooks with vocabulary words. Yet after 2 years, he still felt stuck. One rainy afternoon, Daniel sat alone in a small cafe near his apartment. Outside, people hurried through the streets carrying umbrellas. Inside, soft music played in the background. Daniel stared at his notebook and sighed. "Why is English still so difficult?" he whispered. At the next table sat an older man reading a newspaper. The man looked up and smiled. "You seem frustrated," he said. Daniel laughed softly. "Very frustrated." The older man folded his newspaper. "May I ask why?" Daniel hesitated. Then he explained everything. The grammar exercises, the vocabulary lists, the endless studying, the feeling that he was running, but never reaching the finish line. The older man listened quietly. When Daniel finished, the man asked a simple question. "Do you enjoy learning English?" Daniel opened his mouth. Then he stopped, because he wasn't sure. He had never asked himself that question before. He wanted results, but did he actually enjoy the process? The older man smiled again. Sometimes people focus so much on the destination that they forget to enjoy the journey. Daniel thought about those words all evening, and what happened next surprised him. The following day, he decided not to study for hours. Instead, he listened to a short English story while walking in the park. The sun was shining. Birds sang in the trees. Children laughed near a fountain. And for the first time in a long time, learning English felt peaceful. No pressure, no stress, just listening. At first, Daniel understood only part of the story, but he continued anyway. The next day, he listened again, and again, and again. A week later, something unexpected happened. He noticed familiar words appearing everywhere. In videos, in podcasts, in conversations. Words that once seemed difficult now felt comfortable, almost like old friends. That small discovery gave him confidence, and confidence changed everything. Have you ever noticed how different life feels when you become confident? A simple conversation becomes easier. A challenge feels smaller. A mistake feels less scary. Confidence doesn't appear overnight. It grows quietly, like a tree, day by day, root by root, leaf by leaf. Daniel didn't become fluent in a week or a month, but he started enjoying the process. And when people enjoy something, they naturally spend more time doing it. That was his secret. Not talent, not intelligence, consistency, and enjoyment. One evening, Daniel received an invitation from a friend. There was going to be an international meetup downtown. People from different countries would gather to talk and make friends. Months earlier, Daniel would have said no immediately. The idea terrified him, but now something felt different. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was growing confidence. Maybe it was both. So he decided to go. When he arrived, his heart was beating fast. The room buzzed with conversation. People laughed, shared stories, introduced themselves. For a moment, Daniel considered leaving. Then he saw another person standing alone near a window. A young woman holding a cup of coffee. She looked nervous too. Daniel took a deep breath, walked over, and said 3 simple words. "Hello, I'm Daniel." The woman smiled. "I'm Sophia." That short conversation lasted nearly an hour. They talked about travel, food, movies, family, dreams. Sometimes Daniel made mistakes. Sometimes he searched for words. But something important happened. The conversation continued. Nobody laughed. Nobody judged him. Nobody cared about perfect grammar. They cared about communication. When Daniel returned home that night, he couldn't stop smiling. Not because he spoke perfect English, because he connected with another human being. And that connection felt powerful. Many English learners believe they need perfect English before speaking. But life often works the opposite way. People improve because they speak, not before. Think about children learning their first language. Do they wait until every sentence is perfect? Of course not. They speak. They make mistakes. They learn. They grow. The process is natural. Yet as adults, we often expect perfection from ourselves. And perfection can become a prison. The fear of mistakes keeps many people silent. But every mistake contains information. Every mistake teaches something. Every mistake moves you forward. A few weeks after the meetup, Daniel and Sophia became friends. They met regularly, sometimes at cafes, sometimes in parks, sometimes online. Their conversations became longer and easier. One day, Sophia asked a surprising question. If you could travel anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go? Daniel smiled. He loved travel, but choosing one place felt impossible. I think I would go to Japan, he said. Sophia nodded. Why Japan? Daniel looked out the window. Then he began describing everything he imagined. The bright city lights, The quiet temples, the mountain views, the food, the culture, the adventure. As he spoke, he realized something unusual. He had been speaking English for several minutes without worrying about grammar, without translating, without fear. The words simply flowed, not perfectly, but naturally, and that moment stayed with him because it showed him how far he had come. Progress often feels invisible while it is happening, like watching a tree grow. You don't notice changes every day, but one day you look back and everything is different. Maybe that idea applies to more than language learning. Maybe it applies to life itself. Imagine planting a seed. The next morning, you look outside. Nothing. A week later, still nothing. A month later, nothing visible. Does that mean the seed is failing? No. Beneath the surface, roots are growing. Quietly, patiently, preparing for future growth. People are similar. Sometimes your progress is hidden. Sometimes your effort feels invisible. But invisible does not mean unimportant. Every book you read, every conversation you attempt, every listening practice you complete, something is happening beneath the surface, and eventually the results appear. One afternoon, Daniel received exciting news. A company wanted to interview him for a new position. The opportunity could change his career. There was only one challenge. The interview would be in English. Months earlier, this would have terrified him. Now he felt nervous, but also excited. The night before the interview, rain tapped softly against his window. Daniel sat quietly with a cup of tea. Instead of memorizing complicated phrases, he reflected on everything he had learned. Communication mattered more than perfection. Confidence grew through action. Mistakes were part of progress. Those lessons calmed him. The next morning arrived faster than expected. Daniel put on his best shirt, checked his notes, and entered the interview room. The interviewer smiled. The conversation began. At first, Daniel felt nervous. Then something happened. The nervousness slowly faded. Curiosity replaced it. He stopped focusing on himself and started focusing on the conversation. The interviewer asked about his experience. Daniel answered. Then came questions about teamwork, problem solving, future goals. Some questions were easy. Others were challenging. A few times, Daniel needed an extra second to think, but he stayed calm. He listened carefully. He responded honestly, and before he knew it, the interview was over. When he stepped outside, sunlight filled the street. People hurried past carrying shopping bags. Cars moved through the city. Life continued as usual. Yet Daniel felt different. He didn't know whether he would get the job, but for the first time, that wasn't the most important thing. He had done something he once believed was impossible. A week later, an email arrived. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. He read the first line, then the second, then then he smiled. He got the job. Of course, the job wasn't the true reward. The real reward was the person he had become during the journey. More patient, more confident, more willing to try. Success often arrives quietly, not with fireworks, not with dramatic music. Sometimes success looks like a simple email, a small conversation, a moment of understanding, a fear that no longer controls you. And speaking of fear, let's talk about something many people experience. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a swimming pool. You've never swum before. The water looks cold, deep, uncomfortable. Part of you wants to jump in. Another part wants to stay safely on the side. Learning English can feel exactly the same. The beginning feels uncertain. You worry about making mistakes. You worry about sounding strange. You worry about what others think. But once you enter the water, something changes. You discover that your fears were often larger than reality. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to judge you. Most people appreciate effort. Most people respect courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite fear. Years ago, a teacher told Daniel something he never forgot. The teacher said, "Your future self is watching." At first, Daniel didn't understand, but over time, the meaning became clear. Imagine the version of yourself 1 year from now. That future version knows more, understands more, can do things that seem difficult today. Every small action you take is a gift to that future person. Listening today is a gift. Practicing tomorrow is a gift. Trying again after a mistake is a gift. Your future self benefits from the effort you make right now. And one day, your future self may look back and thank you. Late one evening, Daniel sat on a park bench watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold. A cool breeze moved through the trees. People walked dogs along the path. Cyclists passed by. The world seemed peaceful. As he watched the sun disappear below the horizon, he remembered something from childhood. When he was young, he loved puzzles. The bigger the puzzle, the more exciting it felt. At first, thousands of scattered pieces looked impossible. There was no clear picture, only confusion. But piece by piece, the image slowly appeared. Learning English is very similar. At the beginning, words seem disconnected. Sentences feel confusing. Conversations move too quickly. But each new word is another puzzle piece. Each listening session adds another piece. Each conversation reveals more of the picture. And eventually, what once looked impossible becomes clear. The secret is not solving the entire puzzle today. The secret is placing one piece at a time. Many people quit because they focus on how far they still need to go. Successful people often focus on the next small step. That difference matters. Imagine two hikers climbing a mountain. One constantly stares at the distant peak. The mountain seems endless. The journey feels exhausting. The other focuses on the next few steps. One rock, one turn, one small section of the trail. Eventually, both reach the same destination, but one enjoys the journey much more. Which hiker would you rather be? Life gives us this choice every day. And while we're talking about journeys, let me tell you about something unusual that happened to Sophia. One weekend, she decided to take a train to a small town she had never visited before. The town wasn't famous. There were no major tourist attractions, no giant landmarks, no crowded streets. Yet something drew her there. When she arrived, she discovered narrow roads lined with old trees, small bakeries filled with the smell of fresh bread, friendly shop owners who greeted visitors with warm smiles. The town moved more slowly than the city. At first, Sophia felt impatient. Then she noticed something. People seemed happier. They weren't rushing. They weren't constantly checking phones. They weren't trying to do 10 things at once. They were simply present. That observation stayed with her. When she returned home, she shared the experience with Daniel, and together they discussed a simple question. How often do we miss beautiful moments because we are rushing toward the next thing, the next goal, the next achievement, the next destination? Sometimes happiness hides in ordinary moments. A quiet morning, a conversation with a friend, a walk under the stars, a new word finally understood, a sentence spoken with confidence. These moments may seem small, yet they often become the memories we treasure most. One winter evening, snow began falling across the city. The streets turned white. Streetlights reflected against the snowflakes. Everything looked magical. Daniel wrapped himself in a warm coat and went for a walk. The cold air felt fresh. The city seemed quieter than usual. As he walked, he thought about how much had changed. Not only his English, his mindset, his habits, his confidence. And then he remembered something interesting. There had never been one dramatic moment that changed everything. There had been hundreds of small moments, tiny decisions, small actions repeated consistently, listening instead of quitting, practicing instead of avoiding, trying instead of waiting. Those choices created transformation. Many people search for a secret shortcut, a magical method, an instant solution. But real growth often comes from simple actions repeated over time. The process isn't always exciting, but the results can be extraordinary. Think about a river. A river doesn't cut through rock because it is powerful for one day. It succeeds because it continues flowing, day after day, year after year. Persistence creates change, and persistence becomes easier when you remember why you started. Why did you begin learning English? Maybe you want better opportunities. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to connect with people around the world. Maybe you want to understand movies, books, or podcasts. Maybe you simply want to prove to yourself that you can do it. Whatever your reason, it matters. Hold on to it, because purpose creates momentum. Momentum creates consistency. Consistency creates results. One morning, nearly a year after meeting Sophia, Daniel received a message. It contained only one sentence. "Thank you for saying hello that day." Daniel smiled immediately. The message was from Sophia. She explained that she had felt lonely during that meetup, nervous, uncertain, and that simple conversation had changed her experience completely. Daniel sat quietly for a moment. Then he realized something powerful. We rarely know how our actions affect other people. A smile, a kind word, a conversation. These small things can create unexpected ripples, like dropping a stone into water. The circles spread farther than we imagine. Language allows those connections to happen. Every language opens doors, not only to information, but to people, stories, ideas, friendships, opportunities, entire worlds. That is why learning a language is so special. You are not simply learning words. You are expanding your ability to connect with humanity. And perhaps that is one of the greatest adventures available to us. As the months passed, Daniel continued learning, not because he had to, because he wanted to. English was no longer a problem to solve. It had become part of his life, a bridge connecting him to experiences he once could not reach. And if you are listening right now, perhaps you are building your own bridge. Maybe your progress feels slow. Maybe some days feel difficult. Maybe you wonder whether your efforts are working. If so, remember the seed beneath the soil, the puzzle coming together piece by piece, the river shaping stone through persistence. Growth is often invisible before it becomes obvious. Trust the process. Keep listening. Keep learning. Keep moving forward. One day, you may wake up and realize something surprising. You understand more than you ever thought possible. You speak with confidence that once seemed distant. You have become the person you hoped to become. And when that day arrives, you may discover a beautiful truth. The journey itself was the reward. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take a deep breath, relax, and remember, every word you understand today is proof that you are growing. Every minute you spend listening matters, and your story is still being written. Outside, the city lights began to shine like thousands of tiny stars. Cars moved slowly along the streets. Windows glowed with warm yellow light. Some people were finishing dinner. Some were returning home from work. Some were sitting with friends, sharing stories about their day. Daniel stood near his window and watched the world for a while. There was something comforting about knowing that millions of people were living their own stories at that exact moment. Some were celebrating, some were struggling, some were beginning new chapters, others were closing old ones. Life was moving everywhere, and somehow that thought made him feel less alone. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes the world feels very big, and yet at the same time very connected. A person in one country drinks coffee while watching the sunrise. Another person across the world watches the sunset. Someone is learning a new skill. Someone is reading a book. Someone is listening to English right now. Different lives, different places, yet connected through shared experiences. That realization became one of Daniel's favorite thoughts because it reminded him that growth is something almost everyone understands. Everyone knows what it feels like to start as a beginner. Every expert was once inexperienced. Every confident speaker once struggled for words. Every successful person once faced uncertainty. Nobody begins at the finish line. One Saturday morning, Daniel decided to visit a bookstore. The air was cool, the streets were calm, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery. Inside the bookstore, shelves stretched in every direction. Thousands of stories waited quietly. Adventure stories, mysteries, biographies, travel journals, books about science, books about history, books about life. Daniel slowly walked through the aisles. Then something caught his attention. A small book with a simple cover. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. Yet for some reason, he picked it up. The first page contained a short sentence. The person you become is shaped by what you repeatedly do. Daniel read the sentence twice, then a third time. It sounded simple, but the more he thought about it, the deeper it became. What do we repeatedly do? What habits fill our days? What thoughts occupy our minds? Because little things accumulate. A single drop of water seems insignificant, but millions of drops can fill an ocean. 1 minute of listening may not feel life-changing, but hundreds of minutes create remarkable improvement. A single workout changes little. Years of exercise transform the body. One kind action may seem small. Repeated kindness changes relationships. Life often responds to consistency, not intensity. That afternoon, Daniel sat in a park reading his new book. Nearby, children played soccer. A dog chased a ball. Leaves moved gently in the breeze. Everything felt peaceful. Then an elderly man sat on the bench beside him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then the man smiled and asked, "Good book?" Daniel nodded. "Very good. What is it about?" Daniel thought for a moment. Then he laughed. "Honestly, it's about life." The older man smiled. The best books usually are. They talked for nearly 30 minutes. About travel, work, dreams, lessons learned through experience. When they finally said goodbye, Daniel realized something interesting. Meaningful conversations can happen almost anywhere. A cafe, a train, a park, a bookstore. Sometimes the most valuable moments arrive when we least expect them. And often, those moments begin with something very small. A question, a greeting, a smile. Years later, People rarely remember every detail of a conversation, but they remember how it made them feel. That is true in language learning as well. People may forget your grammar mistakes. They may forget your pronunciation errors, but they remember enthusiasm, kindness, confidence, humor, energy. Human connection is far more powerful than perfection. One rainy evening, Sophia shared a story from her childhood. When she was young, she loved drawing. Every day, she filled notebooks with sketches. Trees, animals, people, landscapes. At first, her drawings were not very good. In fact, some were terrible. She laughed while showing Daniel a few old examples. The proportions were wrong. The details were messy. The pictures looked funny. Yet she kept drawing, day after day, month after month, year after year. And eventually, she became skilled, not because she was born talented, because she practiced. Daniel immediately saw the connection. Learning English worked exactly the same way. Most skills grow through repetition, not perfection. The people we admire often appear naturally talented, but we rarely see the thousands of hours behind their success. The practice sessions, the mistakes, the failures, the quiet effort nobody noticed. Every achievement has a hidden story, and perhaps your own story is still unfolding. Maybe this listening practice feels easy today. Maybe some parts feel difficult. Either way, every minute matters. Your brain is adapting, recognizing patterns, building connections, strengthening understanding. The progress may feel invisible, but it is happening. Imagine learning English like building a house. You do not start with the roof. You begin with the foundation, then one wall, then another, one brick at a time. A person who places one brick every day eventually builds something extraordinary. A person who constantly worries about the finished house may never begin. So focus on today's brick, today's lesson, today's listening practice, today's small victory. That is enough. Late one night, a storm passed through the city. Rain tapped against windows. Thunder rolled across the sky. The streets emptied. Most people stayed indoors. Daniel sat comfortably with a warm drink and listened to the rain. There was something relaxing about storms when viewed from a safe place. The sound felt almost musical, steady, rhythmic, calming. As he listened, another thought entered his mind. Life contains seasons, just like weather. Some seasons feel bright and easy. Others feel challenging. Some days motivation is high. Some days motivation disappears completely. That is normal. No one feels inspired every day. The key is continuing, even when inspiration is absent, because habits are often more reliable than motivation. Motivation says, I feel like doing it. Habit says, this is simply what I do. And habits can carry us surprisingly far. Perhaps that is why small daily actions are so powerful. They continue working, even when emotions change, even when circumstances change, even when progress feels slow. One morning, shortly after the storm, Daniel woke up before sunrise. The world outside was quiet. The sky remained dark blue. For a few minutes, everything felt still. Then gradually, light began to appear. The horizon turned gold. Birds started singing. Shadows softened. A new day arrived. Watching the sunrise reminded him of something important. Most transformations happen gradually. Night does not become day instantly. Winter does not become spring overnight. A seed does not become a tree in a week. Growth takes time, and yet time passes, whether we use it wisely or not. A year from now, the days will have passed. The months will have passed. The seasons will have changed. The question is simple. Who will you become during that time? The answer often depends on the small choices repeated every day. The book you read, the conversation you start, the lesson you complete, the courage you practice, the effort you make even when nobody is watching. Those things shape the future. And perhaps right now, as you listen to these words, you are already creating that future. One sentence at a time, 1 minute at a time, one day at a time. So wherever you are in the world, take a moment and appreciate how far you have already come. Maybe you understand more English than you did 6 months ago. Maybe you feel more confident than before. Maybe you notice progress that once seemed impossible. Give yourself credit for that growth, because growth deserves recognition. And remember this, you do not need to move quickly. You only need to keep moving. Slow progress is still progress. Small steps still move you forward. And every journey, no matter how long, is completed one step at a time. So keep listening, keep learning, keep believing in your ability to improve. Your future self is waiting, and every word you understand today brings you one step closer to meeting that person. For a moment, imagine that you are standing at the edge of a long road. The road stretches beyond the horizon. You cannot see where it ends. At first, that might seem discouraging, but look closer. The road is not empty. It is filled with discoveries, interesting people, unexpected opportunities, beautiful moments, small victories, lessons you have not learned yet. The destination matters, but the experiences along the way matter too. Many years ago, a traveler was asked an unusual question. What is the most important part of a journey? The traveler thought carefully. Then he replied, the part I am experiencing right now. At first, the answer sounded strange, but the more people thought about it, the more sense it made. We often spend so much time thinking about tomorrow that we forget to notice today. We focus on future success, future goals, future happiness. Meanwhile, life quietly unfolds in the present moment. The sound of rain on a roof, a laugh shared with a friend, a new phrase finally understood. A peaceful evening walk. These moments seem ordinary while they happen, yet later they often become treasured memories. One afternoon, Daniel received a phone call from his younger cousin. His cousin sounded frustrated. "I feel stuck," he admitted. "No matter how much I study, I don't feel like I'm improving." Daniel smiled because he remembered feeling exactly the same way. Instead of giving advice immediately, he asked a question. "If you planted a tree today, would you dig it up tomorrow to check whether the roots were growing?" His cousin laughed. "Of course not." "Why not?" "Because that would stop it from growing." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes people do the same thing with their progress. They check constantly. They worry constantly. They judge themselves constantly instead of allowing growth to happen naturally. Some things require patience. Learning is one of them." The cousin became quiet. Then he said, "I never thought about it that way." Neither had Daniel when he first started. But some lessons become obvious only after experience teaches them. A few days later, Daniel visited a local market. The place was alive with energy. Vendors called out to customers. Fresh fruit filled colorful displays. The smell of spices drifted through the air. Children ran between stalls. Musicians played nearby. Everywhere he looked, life seemed to be moving. As he walked through the crowd, he noticed a little girl trying to ride a bicycle. She wobbled, lost balance, and fell. Her father helped her stand. She tried again. A few seconds later, she fell again. Then again, and again. Yet something was remarkable. She never appeared embarrassed. She never looked defeated. She simply kept trying. Eventually, after many attempts, she rode several meters without falling. The smile on her face was unforgettable. Pure joy, pure pride, pure accomplishment. Watching her reminded Daniel of an important truth. Children often learn faster because they are less afraid of failure. They treat mistakes as part of the process. Adults sometimes do the opposite. They treat mistakes as evidence that they should stop. But mistakes are often proof that learning is happening. Think about that for a moment. Every skill you possess today once felt difficult. Walking, reading, driving, cooking, using technology. At one time, each of those abilities seemed unfamiliar. Now many of them feel automatic. Why? Because repetition transformed effort into skill. The same process works in countless areas of life. One evening, Sophia invited Daniel to a photography exhibition. Neither of them knew much about photography, but curiosity brought them there. The exhibition featured images from around the world. Snow-covered mountains, busy city streets, desert landscapes, ocean waves, tiny villages, ancient buildings. Each photograph captured a single moment, yet behind every image was a story. A photographer waiting patiently for the perfect light, a traveler crossing great distances, a person noticing beauty that others overlooked. As they moved from picture to picture, Sophia said something interesting. Most people walk past amazing things every day. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? She pointed to a photograph of sunlight shining through a window. It isn't a famous landmark. It's just light. But someone noticed how beautiful it was. Daniel thought about that for the rest of the evening. How many wonderful things go unnoticed simply because people are distracted. Perhaps learning works the same way. Progress often arrives quietly, without announcements, without dramatic signs. A word understood instantly, a sentence spoken confidently, a conversation that feels easier than before. Small improvements deserve attention because small improvements eventually become major changes. One cold morning, Daniel decided to take a different route to work. The streets were unfamiliar. The buildings looked different. Everything felt new. Along the way, he discovered a small cafe he had never noticed before. The cafe sat on a quiet corner. Plants decorated the entrance. Soft music played inside. The atmosphere felt welcoming. Daniel ordered a coffee and sat near the window. While he was there, he noticed something written on a chalkboard. Stay curious. Only 2 words. Yet those words stayed in his mind all day. Curiosity is powerful. Curiosity turns learning into exploration. Curiosity transforms challenges into adventures. Curiosity asks questions, looks deeper, keeps moving forward. Many successful learners share one trait. They remain curious. Instead of saying, "This is difficult," they ask, "How does this work?" Instead of saying, "I can't do this," they ask, "How can I improve?" The difference may seem small, but it changes everything. Curiosity creates momentum, and momentum carries people farther than they expect. Months later, Daniel found himself sitting on an airplane. A business trip had given him the opportunity to travel abroad. As the aircraft rose above the clouds, he looked out the window. The world below became smaller. Roads looked like thin lines. Buildings appeared tiny. Entire cities fit within his view. From that height, everyday problems seemed smaller too. Sometimes a change in perspective can be surprisingly powerful. A challenge that feels enormous today may look different tomorrow. A problem that seems permanent may eventually disappear. A fear that controls you now may one day become a distant memory. Perspective has a way of changing everything. When the plane landed, Daniel stepped into a country he had never visited before. New sights surrounded him, new sounds, new food, new experiences. And throughout the trip, English helped him communicate with people from many different places. Hotel staff, taxi drivers, travelers, business professionals, new friends. Every conversation reminded him why he had started learning in the first place. Language creates opportunities. Opportunities create experiences. Experiences create memories, and memories become part of who we are. Years from now, people rarely remember every grammar rule they studied, but they remember conversations, friendships, journeys, moments that mattered. That is the true value of communication, not perfection, connection. As the trip continued, Daniel met people from countries he had only read about. Each person carried unique stories, different cultures, different traditions, different perspectives. Yet, despite those differences, something connected them all. Everyone wanted to be understood. Everyone wanted to share experiences. Everyone wanted meaningful connections, and language made those connections possible. One night, after a long day, Daniel walked beside a river flowing through the city. The water reflected the lights of nearby buildings. A gentle breeze moved across the surface. The scene felt calm and timeless. Standing there, he realized something. The world is full of possibilities. Many of them become available only when we continue learning. New skills open new doors. New knowledge creates new opportunities. And every step forward expands what is possible. Perhaps that is why growth feels so rewarding. It reminds us that we are capable of becoming more than we were yesterday. Not different people, just stronger versions of ourselves. More experienced, more confident, more prepared for whatever comes next. And that journey never truly ends. There is always something new to learn, a new place to explore, a new idea to understand, a new conversation waiting to happen. So as you listen right now, remember this simple thought. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need perfect answers. You do not need perfect English. You only need the willingness to continue. Because remarkable things often happen to people who keep going. One step, one lesson, one conversation, one day at a time. And sometimes, without even realizing it, those small steps carry you farther than you ever imagined possible.